Like in any area of my life, I don't get to just pick and choose whatever I want, however I want. And yet porn is a way of me training myself in that kind of depravity. And then of course, beyond, these are the obvious sexual objectification of what I'm looking at. There's the infidelity, because porn absolutely is infidelity. I'm bringing other people sexually into my life.
Yeah. It's an emotional affair.
Right. So it's like, if I'm single, if I'm in a relationship, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, but no matter what my scenario is, there's so much destruction that's happening. And then, so it's absolutely an addiction, sexual addiction, which sexual addiction is not necessarily an addiction to sex. It's not an addiction to sexual activity. It involves, or it's connected to that, right? But it's not an addiction to the sexual act itself. But the dopamine hits that I'm getting every time I'm looking at porn, every time I'm, when I say it's not necessarily related to sex, like, so a lot of my emotion, or a lot of my affairs, the highs that I was chasing, it wasn't the sexual act. It was getting that text back from that woman.
Right.
It was sitting at that, sitting in the hotel parking lot, waiting for somebody to show up. Like, all of these things that were not technically part of the sexual act, but it was living in the forbidden land, eating the forbidden fruit, the risk reward, the high risk, right? All of this stuff was giving me another hit, another high. And sexual, all sin is progressive, right? that's very scriptural. Sexual addiction, absolutely. The type of porn that I watched when I was 19 was not the kind of stuff I started at 13. The things that I would do with people, the ways that I would treat people at 25 was very different than what I would allow myself to do at 18. It gets progressively darker and more depraved, and I want riskier, I want darker, I want newer, and I want more different. And the other thing too, so like Doug Weiss calls it sex glue. If I'm looking at porn, if I'm with a woman physically, any sexual act, I'm gluing myself, I'm tethering myself to that thing in front of me. I'm tethering myself to the environment around me. And so in a marriage, this is beautiful, right? I'm tethering myself to my wife. I'm tethering myself to her. And it's this incredible bond that's like this most special bond that a human can have, right? And yet when I do that with porn, if I do that with, a lady at work, I'm doing that with a prostitute, like, I did that for years, where I'm tethering myself to all these places and people and things, which again, it's an incredibly spiritually destructive thing. It's also an incredibly physiologically destructive thing. It breaks me, and it's not the way that I was designed to live, right? As a human, as a man. And yet that was the state of living that I was in for so many years.
And then there's the cycle of, and this is any addictive cycle for those who aren't aware of this. Like, it's, you do the thing to relieve your pain or perceived pain, then you feel guilt and shame about it. So then you're back to feeling your pain, and so you just keep swirling the drain, and it just goes down, 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 and and so you actually have to you have to retrain yourself with new cycles that aren't self-destructive and instead are uplifting. And it's a very difficult thing to do, but that, to your point too, that's why it has to be someone else's plan. It has to be someone else's directive and someone else's rules to hold you to it, because it's virtually impossible, I'd say actually impossible, for any person to just will themselves out of the thing that it is. And it could be drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever the gambling. Any of these kinds of things, it does the same swirl in the brain. But yeah, just wanted to make that point, for those who may not be aware of that. That's how the brain gets conditioned when we start to do this to ourselves.
Yeah. One of the relapse cycle, one of the things that we focus on more than almost any, or maybe this is the single document that we focus on the most when I'm going through recovery with my guys here locally, is that relapse cycle, is going through those individual stages. There's different versions, right, that you can find. But ultimately it's all the same concept. And one of the beautiful parts about recovery is it allows me to see that at every single stage, there's an off ramp. But in my addiction, I don't see that. In my addiction, it feels like it feels like I'm sliding down an icy hill, When in reality, no, I am walking intentionally down that hill, and at any single step, I can choose to stop. I can choose to walk away. But it doesn't feel like that when I'm an addict, right? When I'm living in my addiction, I've got no healthy infrastructure. I'm on my own. I'm not inviting external counsel.
Yeah, and that I feel like that's especially true for people who have been in it in a long time, right? You know, the longer you're in it, the worse that feeling is going to, or that stronger that pull is going to be, or the glue, as you say. And you know,
Yeah.
I think that complements the Bible so well, though, is like, you know, when we take something that God has meant for a blessing that's so beautiful and then we perverse it, even just a little bit, it just shows you how much that a broken world can just make it massively worse, you know, and make it way worse. So I'm so glad that you have figured out how to slow and to stop that. Now, saying that, what were some of the most significant challenges you faced during your journey of addiction?
So one of the first things that pops out at me is, I don't know that like this is the most challenging, but it was a big one. I now know the term imposter syndrome, right? I didn't know that term 7 years ago. But, you know, as I accrued some sobriety and I had been in the program for a little bit, I mean, especially looking back on it, it was like only a little bit, but, you know, maybe this is 6 months in or whatever. So at the time, it's like, this is a long time to be in a program. This is a long time to be not having affairs, to not be looking at porn. But there were times where I'm like, I don't know if I'm any different. Is all I'm doing simply avoiding acting out? Is there any healing going on? Is there any long-term change? I mean, I remember having the thoughts like, okay, like I'm doing it. This is keeping my wife around. This is keeping my kids around. But if for any reason Carrie decided to still leave me, I'm pretty sure I would just jump right back into my addiction. And I remember feeling like that for a long time, like way longer than I'm proud
Mm.
of, like maybe 3 or 4 years, to be honest. I'm thinking of that number off the top of my head, but even beyond the time of graduation, I remember thinking like, if worst came to worst, like I don't know that I'm in this for me. I don't know that I'm in this for my relationship with Christ. I'm in this to keep my family. And that's a heck of a one to deal with, you know, and that was not something that just overnight, you know, or, oh, I did this one homework assignment and then it got fixed. It took a long time. Part of that was my relationship with Christ, which, to be honest, it wasn't until almost 2 years in that I felt like I can pray, I can talk to God. Because until that time, prayer basically equaled confessing doing evil things to an angry dad. Now that's my version, right? That's what I thought of as prayer. So the idea that I can just talk to God, like that was not part of my life, you know, for 25, 26
Mm.
years. So having a relationship with Christ, it was a big part of it. And then just seeing it as like, okay, I can just be not perfect, but I can be a loving person just out and about, out in the world. My two choices are not, I either go back to being addict Logan, or I shield my eyes and I don't look at anything and I don't hear anything and I don't. And like for the early part of recovery, it kind of felt like those were my two choices. I either don't experience the world around me at all because it's not safe, and there were times where I kind of needed to do that, right? But that wasn't going to be long-term sustainable. Or I'm going to go back to being old Logan. And it took time to get to a point where like, no, there's a third option. There's a third option where I'm safe, where I'm intentional. I have my boundaries. I've got accountability, but I can interact with people around me in a healthy way.